Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this episode, we're going to go ahead and create the Angular blog. If you're interested in getting the source code for this project, it's available if you support me on my Patreon. If not, let's go ahead and continue creating this blog. So I'm going to go ahead and type in .NET new web and give it a name of Angular-blog. Okay, so now that our application is created, let me clear the console. And here we have an empty MVC project. Now, to create the Angular app, I will use the Angular CLI. I'm not going to put myself through the pain of doing it from scratch. So to use the Angular CLI, you can first type in ng. If you have it installed, good. If not, make sure you're at the latest version. So you'll have to do npm and install at global angular-cli. If you're on a different version, just be warned that it might not work for you because Angular changes so often. And if you're not on the same version as me, I cannot guarantee that this will work for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and install Angular CLI. I'll say npm install -g at angular/cli. Okay, so after that has installed, we can type in ng, and now we should see some commands that are available to us. Now, the only one that we're interested for now is the new command to create a new workspace with the Angular app. Okay, so let me clear this console. Let me cd into my Angular blog. And from here, I will go ahead, say ng new, and let's type in help to see what is available to us. Okay, so I see a bunch of options and a bunch of commands to this, what's it called, to create a bunch of other stuff. But all we really want to do is, or actually, I must have skipped in. There we go. So all we want to do is really provide the name. Let's go ahead and say ng new, and I'll follow the same pattern as I do in my Vue blog. I'll call it Angular. Oh, Angular-app. Let me remove this tag. And for my options, I will include the routing, yes, and I'll use SCSS for my styling preprocessor. Okay, so I'll select that. Okay, so now that that's installed, you might want to take a pause here. If your internet is really slow, you might want to go make a cup of tea or take a nap. But nevertheless, let's keep going. I'm not going to go into the Angular app or explain what any of this is. I'm just going to go ahead and dive into actually setting this up. So let's go ahead into the CS project first. And what I want to do is actually add a reference to my blog project here. Okay, so let's create a new item group. And close this off. And in here, I want to add a not package reference, but rather project reference. And this can be a self-closing tag. Let's say include equals, let's exit this project. We'll go into blog and we'll grab the blog.cs proj file. Let's save that. Okay, let's go ahead and exit this and give this, or actually, no, never mind. I need to be in this one. And let's do .NET restore. Okay, so that's nice. It's restored. Let me close this, and we can always double check if that's successful if we get IntelliSense. So let's go into services. So you can see we're not getting IntelliSense. So the way to fix this would be say Ctrl-Shift-B and use the OmniSharp restart command. So OmniSharp has now restarted. So let's go ahead and see if it still works. And add MVC, looks like it doesn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and restart my Visual Studio Code. Okay, so after restarting my Visual Studio Code, I'm going to go into services, and now I can see my add blog here. That's all. That's cool. So it accepts a connection string. So let's quickly go into view blog, and we will grab app settings and development.js. And what I want to do is I want to delete these two and just place my previous configuration in here. Looks like I didn't copy correctly, so let's Ctrl-C again, and let's paste this into here. Okay, and I will pretty much grab the same configuration I have here for the database and copy it to this startup here, like this. I will need to import Microsoft Extensions configuration into the startup for our configuration to work. Let's go ahead and pass the connection here. Okay, we will delete this comment, this pesky comment, and then let's go ahead and say use blog here. Use blog, and I think the default routing will be alright here. Next thing, what we want to do is we want to tell our Angular app or our .NET side of the app to actually where our Angular app lives, because Angular gets first class support, which is not really that first class with the .NET Core, but it's something. So let's go into services and we'll say use, or rather add spa static files. In here we can specify some options, and in these options we can say root path, and this root path will essentially lead to the dist folder, which we don't yet have, but once we build our application we will have. So let's go ahead and say angular-app-dist. Okay, so, and close this off with a semicolon. So distribution folder dist, this is really widely known name for somewhere where build files are placed, so that should be pretty self-explanatory. Next thing in our app here, I want to say use spa. So this is that first class support I was talking about it. And here we want to provide some configuration. So the first thing we want to say again is where our application is. So the source path is what we need to set, and angular-app is how we basically specify the source path. Okay, and the next thing we want to do is something similar to how we configure Webpack and View-blog. We want to tell our .NET app what command it needs to run to spin it up for development, because if we go to angular-app and we go into package.json, we get all these different scripts that we can run, and really the ng server is the one that we're interested in for development. So I'm going to copy the start command, and what I will need to do is I'll need to add the Angular CLI service. So spy use Angular CLI server, not service, server. And if I press Ctrl dot, I can import the namespace, and in here I can basically provide the npm script that should be used in development. And to really make sure that this only runs in development, let's say environment is development environment, and let's wrap this in this if statement, and let's make some space here. Okay, so this is what it looks like now. What's in this view blog? I must have accidentally moved an OBG folder into my view blog, so I'm gonna go ahead and delete that. Okay, and the bin looks like I've moved quite a bit into my, what is this? Huh? Hold up. Why is the view blog here? Looks like I've moved accidentally the whole project into here, so let me move that to recycle bin. I am going to also double check that it has actually been deleted on disk. I don't want any unexpected errors. So reveal an explorer. Let's take a look at... Okay, so for some reason I have an Angular blog copy with a view blog. Alright, and not to fret, I will just go ahead and delete it here. Okay, so I have managed to delete it. I must have made that mistake when I was copying over the package, the app settings into the Angular blog, but that's done with. So just know that you need the Angular app, the default one, and all this configuration that we did in the startup. So I added the blog and the spa configuration. Okay. So the error should go away. Let's go ahead into the terminal. I'll clear this. I will cd into Angular blog, and I'll do a .NET restore before we go. Okay, now that that's done, let's go ahead and just do .NET run. Okay, so it looks like I got an error, and it's asking me for a certificate. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go into my program.cs. I will hide the console, and I will tell it to use a specific route. So use URLs, and I will specify just localhost 5051. Okay, close this and let's try running again. Okay, so it's running. Let's go ahead and launch this. I will minimize my app here. Let's see what we get. Okay, so this looks pretty pimped out. Let's double check the version that I have in my package.json. It's 8.2.3, and the version for my CLI, if I add this ng-v, let's see what it do. I guess I don't need to type -v. I say just ng version. And Angular CLI is 8.3.0. Okay, so just in case you're confused by the versioning, this is the versions that I'm using. Okay, so let's go ahead and develop this blog app. All we want to do is basically connect it. So let's check that our blog still works. So if I go to -blog, here's the data that I'm getting. And if I go to -blog admin-index, I'm logged in. So from my previous tries, yeah, so it looks good. Let's go ahead and actually try to develop this app. I'm going to go into my app. I'm going to go into app component.html. I'm going to go ahead, scroll right to the bottom, because right here I have my router outlet. I want to select everything except that and delete it. Okay. And let's go ahead and wrap this in a div. Okay. And I will say another div. So class app. And then here I will say the same. Megablog. Let's format all of this. Now I can open up this app.component.css. I will say .app. Let's say display flex, justify content center. And let's take this div and let's make it max width of 400 pixels, and width will always be 100%. Okay. Let's go back to our blog to see what it looks like. Okay, so I have my mega blog here. Let's go into global styles here, where I have styles.css. And really all I want to do here is set HTML background color to Azure, same as we had, and body margin. So margin, I will set it to 0. Okay. I'll close that, and for my h1 inside this div, I will go ahead and say text align center. I'm going to put my text in the center. Okay, so let's see if it aligns. Okay, there we go. Nice. Next thing I want to do is I want to display my blogs. Now, since I already have my blog up in the cloud on my server, I want something to be able to retrieve it. Now, Angular has a built-in HTTP client, so we don't need to use Axios. I'm going to go ahead and first enable this HTTP client. For this, I will need to add in a module. So let's go into app module, and in here I will just type in HTTP client module, and usually would give IntelliSense. So let's try this again. Okay, client. Let's type this in and let's add module, and that's the wrong namespace. Okay, never mind. Let's create an import statement, and we will say at Angular we'll need to go into common/http, and we will need to grab HTTP client module, and that's the module that we want to use. Okay, so at Angular -common-http HTTP client module, and this will allow us to interact with our server. Okay, so once that's done, I'm gonna close this. I will open my command line, and in here I want to clear it. I want to cd into my Angular app. I want to cd then into my Angular app, sorry, Angular blog, and then Angular app. So once we're here, we want to use the Angular CLI tool to generate our component. So for this, we will type in ng G for generate. You can type in generate the full word, but I'll stick with G. And then component. And I will give this a component, a name of main. So this will be our main page where I display all my blog posts. Okay, so let's go ahead and type that in. Okay, so you can see here that it's created these files. Let's go ahead and take a look at them. So here we have the main folder where all these components. So this is what it has created. And then it has said here that it has updated the app.module, and what it has actually done, if we take a look, it has added the main component here to the ng module, so we can actually start using this main component straight away, so we don't forget to add it. And let's go ahead into our main component and take a look at the page that it has generated. And all it does is it says main works. Now we are not seeing this on our page here, so we actually have to set up a route for this. So if we go into app-routing.module, let's go ahead and add a route here so we can actually see it, because you know that we have the router view here, or rather the router outlet. All right, so let's go ahead, close this. We know that that's where our route components are meant to display. Let's go ahead and add a path. This path will be empty, and we will grab the component, and this will be the main component. So this main component comes from -main.component. So we could have typed that out manually, but VS Code actually gives us a bit of a hand here since we have strong typing. So in main components.ts, this is where our main component is, and this is where we'll actually use the HTTP client to get our data. Okay, so let's go ahead, close this routing module for now. In our constructor, I want to create a private HTTP for HTTP client, and the type of it is going to be HTTP client. Now IntelliSense is showing auto import from Angular common.htp, and if you remember, this is where we got our module from. So this is what we'll need. There's another HTTP client here, and it comes from Selenium. And this is a testing framework, so that's not what we want. We want the one from common/HTTP. Okay. So once we have this HTTP client, we can go ahead, call this HTTP get, and really simple /blog, and then we want to subscribe to it. And in this subscribe method, we will basically create or rather grab data, but I would rather not call it data. I will call it blogs, and blogs can be a type of anything, right? Because if you're a good citizen, you're gonna make your own statically typed classes here. I don't like Angular that much, so I'm not gonna do that. So I'm gonna say that it's of type any, and I want to be able to assign it somewhere on this class. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a public blogs. So this is where I'm gonna store my blogs. It's going to be an array, so of type array, and the array is going to contain some other type, right? So same as C#, you have a list of certain type. This is going to be a list of anything. And how we specify here, any can be a string, it can be an array, it can be a list, it can be any class, it can even be an HTTP client, but this basically says remain dynamic, okay? And the default value that I want for my blogs is I'll actually just say empty array for now, right? So let's go ahead and say this blogs equals blogs in this scope, and that's it, right? So ng on init, this function is executed after the constructor is called, and this is something sort of like a hook in Vue, all right? So like on a created or mounted hook, all right? This is ng init hook, and once the component is created, this what's it called? This function will be called, and we'll get the blogs. All right, so here we can actually see that the main works. So we're displaying our page, but just didn't pay attention to that before. But let's go ahead and delete this. Let's create a div. Same again. I just want header, and I will grab a div here. And what I want is say that what's it called, ng star ng4, and I will say let blog in blogs. So blogs corresponds to this blogs object here, and I will say the syntax is pretty much the same as Angular from here on out. So blog title, and here we'll say blog dot body. Let's save that and see what we get. Okay, it's an error, and I've actually misspelled. It's not in, but rather off. So let blog off blogs. Right, it's easy to confuse when you know a couple of frameworks. But yeah, here is our page displayed. So we're successfully grabbing a blog from the backend, and the backend implementation is actually in a Razor library. All right. So let's go ahead and to blog admin, and I will have to actually say index on the end here, and I'll create Angular. This blog came from the Angular app. Three bangs. Okay. So go ahead and this. Go to the main page again. And here I can see these two blog posts. Okay. So let's go ahead and give them some style. I have a div and I have a header. So that's literally what I can do. Or actually, let's go ahead and just call this class card. I will go into view blog here. I'll cheat a little bit, but only skilled programmers really reuse their code like this. So let's go ahead, grab this, and actually I'll grab this hover as well. I'll put it into my style.cs right here, and this should be okay. Let me collapse my project so I am not getting lost in all these thingies. Okay, so here are our pretty looking components, same as the previous app. Now we actually want to navigate to the posts, like to an actual post. So when we click on it, we want to go ahead and navigate to it. So what we can do is we can go ahead and convert this to a link. So let's convert to a link. We'll say A, and then let's say router link equals, and again, this is something similar to having a router link with a to bound to it, but here we have a regular link with a router link bound to it. So let's go ahead, I'll cut this and I'll put it after the class here, and we want to say slash page name, right? But this is something similar. This is the regular binding to a HTML attribute, same as the same as we bind the class here. So what I mean by that, if we want to use Angular binding in Vue, we would do something like this. But in Angular, we wrap this in square brackets. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So inside here, what we will do is wrap it like this, and we'll say blog.id here. Okay, let's go ahead and press on this. See if we get any errors, and we do. So cannot match any routes. Obviously, we don't have any routes. So let's go ahead and add a routes. I'll open my console here. I will reuse my command that I've typed by pressing up, and then I will just type in post instead of the main. So I'm going to generate a post component. Okay, nicely. I have it now. And same as before, I have the update in the app module here. So if I look into my app module, I can see the post component. All I have to do now is add it to my routes. So let's go ahead and add another route. Let me close these files. Let's create a path. And here we will specify an ID. And the component will be post component. Okay. So let's go ahead and close that and see if we can navigate now. Okay, so we navigate, post works. All we have to do now is actually display the post that we're getting. Okay, so for that, let's go ahead, close this main component. Let's go into the post. And what we will need to do is go into post TypeScript, same as we did for our main. And here, same as before, we will need to create a private. Let me drop this into a new line since I'm going to have more than two. I'll create first the HTTP client, so I want to be getting that specific blog. And next thing that I want is a router. So private route, or route, yeah, rather route. And I want to grab the route. Okay. So what I can do in the constructor is I can say this route, and from here I can grab the params. Params, nope, I have messed it up. It's not a route, it's an activated. It's an actually activated route. Okay, so let me remove this from here. So we grab the route, and here we can grab the params. Okay, and from params we can go ahead subscribe. I'm not sure why it's done this way. I'm not sure why it's not like a static object. And here we can grab these params, and let's just console log them for now. Let's see if we get any surprises. Okay, so let's refresh that. Let me open the console logs. And when we navigate to it, we can see that the ID is 2. All right, so good enough. Let's go ahead and try to assign this ID to something. So, or do we need to? Yeah, go on. Let's create private, or rather public ID, and this will be a number, right? Or rather a string. Let's keep it a string. And from beginning it will be empty, and then we will create a post, which is an object, and I don't want to create a static object, so this can be anything. And let's let it be an empty object for now, or rather no, I want to put an ngif and display the loading bit. Okay, so once we got that, let's replace this with this.id equals params .id. Okay, and on our ng init now, what we can do is we can grab this HTTP client, and let's get, and we will do actually slash blog slash ID of this, and rather we'll have to specify this ID. Now we can subscribe, and same as before, I'll say data, or rather post is anything. Whoa. And in here I will go ahead, grab my post, and set the post that we have grabbed to my posts. Okay, so that looks okay to me. Let me close these other components. I'll grab this post page, and let's go ahead and make a div class post. Okay, and in here I'll just go ahead and copy everything I had in my main, so header and title. I will have to replace the blog part with post, so let's say post and post here as well. And it's not loading. Let me initiate another refresh. Okay, so it looks like we should be getting it, but at the start we have a null. So yep, here's where we get it, but we crashed before that. So let's go ahead and initiate the load. So let's say div and say loading here, and we'll say ng if post equals null. And the way that we specify an else, we can say else have post, and let's go ahead and say hashtag have post. So this is something similar to a reference in Vue, and it seems like it hasn't worked. Let me actually go ahead and delete this. This is not good. And let's say ng if post here. Okay, so if we don't have a post, do this. If we have a post, do this. It seems like I'm not getting anything, so let me grab the network. Let me see what I got from here. So correctly. All right, so it seems like these are asynchronous operations. So let's go ahead and do this. painful. Okay. Oh, that was not nice. Still loading. Alright. Let's console.log this ID. Console. Alright, so we're not getting anything. Might have been my mistake. Params. Let's log params again. Oh, Jesus. Okay. I included 2 equals here. My bad. Okay. Alright, so we're actually getting a blog now. Let me go ahead and see if I did not need to do this. Let me move this back into the constructor. Refresh. Okay, good. Alright, so that's working. Let's go ahead and give this a back button. And I'm actually on the wrong page, so let's go here. And if we do have a post, actually I'll just put it at the bottom here. So let's create a link. I will say router link, and I will set it to empty, and I'll just say back. Okay, so we should have a back button here. Let's go ahead, press it, and there we go. Full navigation. At the moment, this is basically a replica of our current app. So let's make this full screen. Let's open up the dev tools, and let's see that we are not getting any server-side rendering. We have our initial HTML page, and our app is here. So, but we have the setup complete, and that's essentially what we wanted to do in this episode. And this sets up nicely for trying to accomplish server-side rendering in the next episode. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this, leave a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. If you have any questions, you know to leave them in the comments. Hopefully, see you in the next episode.